Uprising, the epic battle for the most fatherless generation in history. And I do want to, first of all, say that this is the most fatherless generation in modern history, in which our fathers are alive but not home. I mean, during the Civil War, there was 643,000 men, I believe it was, killed in the Civil War, mostly men. And so it took 2 generations to actually replenish our fathers at home, because they were dead. But this is the most fatherless generation in the history of America, and actually in the world, in most countries, in which our fathers are alive but they're not home. And so what's going on? As a matter of fact, in America, the last statistic, I believe, was around 2014, taken in 2014, that 51% of all children in America are born out of wedlock. Now, what's interesting is when we wrote the book Uprising, which was written just a couple of years ago, and we tried to refresh those statistics that we had been working with for the writing of the book, and I asked my team to go back and find newer statistics than 2014. A few of them were 2017. Hey, can you go back and find what are the statistics? Because in 1950, only 2% of all children in America were born out of wedlock. And then now 2014, I think is the latest statistic, maybe it's 2016, was 51%. So when we tried to refresh our statistics, what we found is the government no longer keeps those statistics, because we're supposed to believe that you don't need a father in the home. You can have 2 mommies or you can have 2 daddies. Obviously, LGBTQ agenda has really taken the place of fathering and has created a lot of fatherlessness in our society. So you can't even find what the newest fatherless statistics are, because either the government has stopped keeping them or they no longer release them. So this is the generation that we're in. And the question becomes, like, first of all, what do fathers do? Well, they provide, they promote, and they protect. They provide, they promote, and they protect. So what happens when fathers are absent? They did this study, I've quoted it many times, on what happens in South Africa in Kruger Park when they removed when they removed the old elephants, the older elephants, the mature elephants from Kruger Park. Actually, they bred the elephants in Kruger Park. These elephants, I think it's the native white elephant that's native to Africa, to South Africa specifically. And when that elephant began to go extinct, they breeded them and did such a great job that it began to overwhelm the park. So they took those elephants and they put them in another park. And when they did that, they could not move the bull elephants, the large male mature elephants, into the new park, because actually they were flying in there by helicopter and they were just too heavy to live. So what happened in that new environment is that the young elephants, without the older mature bull elephants, they became very violent and began to kill things like the hippopotamuses and the rhinoceroses, the animals that they had lived with for centuries in peace. And they went back and asked the question, like, why are these young elephants, why are they killing these other animals? Why are they becoming violent? And what they found after much study and reintroducing the bull elephants back into the new park by strengthening the harnesses so that they could fly them there, is immediately within 3 months, all the killing stopped. And what they concluded was that the young elephants, were becoming violent when the older male elephants, the adult male elephants, were absent. And they said this, they said that the adult male elephants, the older elephants, were teaching elephants how to be elephants. And what happens when you take fathers out of the home? Well, I could tell you that statistics are staggering. Like, first of all, it's like 95, 96% of all inmates in America are fatherless. Like, think about that. Like, if you are fatherless, you are statistically way more prone to actually be violent and be in prison. In fact, the book does a really good job of tracing those statistics for you, and it shows us that actually homelessness is directly connected to fatherlessness. Mental illness directly connected to fatherlessness. Violent crime directly connected to fatherlessness. Rape directly connected to fatherlessness. I'm talking about you are like 30 times more likely to rape a woman if you don't have a father. These are the kind of statistics that we are dealing with now. And so you're looking at society and you're talking about, the victimization of women, which is just becoming astronomical, and that is directly related to fatherlessness. You're talking about like school dropouts directly related to fatherlessness. School shootings, by the way, school shootings, where the statistics for those are just starting to emerge in the last 5 years, and school shootings are showing directly related to fatherlessness or the absence of fathering. And so this is what happens when society loses its fathers. And you're seeing now delayed marriage. You're seeing people living together without being married. You're seeing children born without a father who's has ownership and fatherhood in their life. And the third thing I'll say is that not only do children become more apt to be mentally ill, more apt to rape, more apt to be violent, more apt to be homeless, more apt to be school dropouts. Not only is that true, but the other side of it is that your father teaches you who you are. Like fatherhood is a part of your identity. It's a part of how you find your identity. Well, think about it like this. Even the sperm of your father determined your sex. It wasn't your mother's egg that determined your sex. It was your father. Think about this. Almost most people, when they get married, they take on the name of the husband, the last name of the husband. I know that there's a few exceptions. Why is that? Because it is culture that father gives you your identity. I'm not saying your mother doesn't help with that, but fathers lead in it. So what happens in a fatherless house? Well, I think that even what we're seeing with homosexuality, the LGBTQ movement, it's growing in the absence of fatherhood, partly because it's your father who helps you to identify who you are as a person and what you're called to be and do. And so when we lose fatherhood, we actually seed immorality, and we seed I think that we're living in a sexual cesspool of delusion, and not all of it, but much of that has directly to do with the fatherlessness. And then I'll say this: it's not just fatherlessness. It's not like it's not just that there's not a male home in the house. It's that male he's become more of a sperm donor than he is a father. And so not only are we talking about fathers being home, but we're also talking about fathers being present. We're talking about a generation, like we're seeing even spiritual fathers become abusers. And so much of that is that they grew up in fatherless homes, or they grew up with a father who wasn't present. They grew up with fathers who didn't discipline and teach them and train them how to treat a woman, how to treat other people. And so it's not just like my dad wasn't home, but it's also that my dad wasn't a dad. And these are all things that we're learning and we're growing. And the sexual revolution was responsible for so much of the, is actually at the foundational roots. We had the free sex 60s, where if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with, which basically said, hey, don't have sexual boundaries, screw whoever you want. Like you don't have to limit your sexual activity to a covenant person. And all that began to break down the marriage and the family and say, marriage is not sacred, family is not necessary. And it's a big part of the reason why we even delay marriage now. It's like, well, if I could satisfy my sex drive with a one night stand, friends with benefits, or masturbation, and society's like, yeah, I'm good with that. And I mean, Joanne's had 4 boyfriends, and she has three children from that, and it's all good. Society has taken away the pressure to act nobly, and in fact embraces what the Bible teaches as an immoral behavior. And all of a sudden, I don't have to marry to actually even deal with my sex drive, when in fact In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, it says it's better to marry than to burn with passion, with sexual passion. But if my sexual passion can be released through ways that the Bible calls immoral, fornication, adultery, homosexuality, pornography, all these things are taking the pressure off of culture to act nobly. And now we have, people, moving into their late 30s and 40s to even consider getting married, because there's all kinds of other ways that they're stimulating their sex drive. The other thing that I'll say about fatherless, or another thing, is that fatherlessness takes away the rite of passage. It takes, somebody coined this phrase, it takes a woman to give birth to a man, but it takes a man to a boy. Start over. It takes a woman to give birth to a boy, but it takes a man to give birth to a man. I think it's so true, because what we have now is we have boys who are, they've become men, but they still feel like boys in culture. And it's your father who gives you the rite of passage. It's fathers that gather around the boy and say, you're now a man. There are many, many cultures, including the Jewish culture and African culture, that have even at least stereotyped the idea that the boy becomes a man. He kills a lion. He does something in culture that the cultures, the fathers, they gather around the boy and they say, okay, you've killed this lion, or you've done this feat, or you've finished this teaching, and now you are a man. And having men in your life commission you as a man when you're passing from boyhood to manhood is part of how boys grow up as they grow old. Because what happens without that is they grow old, but they don't grow up. Now, you're like, well, isn't rite of passage important for women? Absolutely. But let me tell you what happens with a woman. When a girl starts her menstrual cycle, she has women gather around her and teach her how to deal with her menstrual cycle. And because she has a menstrual cycle, she, biologically, she's a woman. She can actually give birth to children, and she is seen as a woman. Well, unfortunately, or however you want to look at it, boys, when they become men, they go through puberty, of course, but they don't have a menstrual cycle. Like, they don't have a day in which you can say, the boy became a man. The boy can now, he can now father children. Where in a woman's life, when a girl becomes a woman, she has a physical sign. She has a period. She has a menstrual cycle in which she's acknowledged as not as obviously a mature woman, but as a woman who's capable of having children. She has a natural rite of passage, where boys do not have a natural rite of passage. It's so, so important. I want to invite you to something that we're doing here. We started this ministry. My son is actually the head of it. It's called Brave Co. And this is a powerful ministry, because I don't know if some of you would be old enough to remember the Promise Keepers movement that filled stadiums and helped boys become men, and helped men become fathers, and helped fathers become great fathers. And I was a part of that movement many, many years ago. Well, Brave Co. is that on steroids, because of computers and social media and social platforms now. We can not just gather men in stadiums, but we can disciple men personally, but also online. And so there's a powerful Brave Co. conference coming up. We'll put it in the chat, those dates. And this conference isn't just people getting up and teaching. This is you being in groups. This is men acknowledging you. This is a place also for boys who are, I think, 12 to 16 or something like that, 12 to 18. There's going to be a rite of passage for them. It's going to be really beautiful and profound. So you might want to join us there. And by the way, if you're interested in this subject, you can get this Uprising book on the Bethel platform, just Bethel.com. You can get it on KV Ministries platform. We got a brand new website there also. And you can get this off Amazon, basically wherever great books are sold. And so Uprising, the epic battle for the most fatherless generation in history. Actually, John Eldredge wrote this. This might be the most important book of this decade. So this is a really great book. If you're interested in it, the first half of this book is about the challenges of fatherhood. Some of them I just mentioned, but it's done really, really well. And the second half is like, what do we do about it? So how do we answer the call to shift a generation and actually see fathers like the story of the prodigal son moving back home and actually becoming a part of a community? Well, God bless you. Hope you have a wonderful week. Lord, I just pray for mothers and fathers, families, children, boys and girls. Lord, that you would actually restore fatherhood in our generation. And 20 years from now, they would be talking about the fatherless generation that had an epic transition and reformation. God bless you. Again, have